There are many different types of runes in Guild Wars 2. Some are good, some are not. So now it's time to go through and find out which is which. As you can see here, there are a ton of different types of runes to choose from, and it can be ridiculously overwhelming trying to pick which ones of these you actually need to care about. Not sure exactly how many there are, but there are at least dozens of them for us to deal with at the moment. And out of these dozens of different rune types, there's only a handful of them that actually see play in endgame content. While some of these other runes may have some niche uses or be decent budget choices for those who are strapped with cash, it's important to know which ones of these you're actually aiming for when gearing out your class, so you're not just wasting gold any more than you need to. I'll mostly be focusing on PvE and World vs World today. Given that PvP has its own reduced set of runes available, I also don't play a huge amount of PvP, so I may not be the best person to ask. With that, let's get started. For simplicity, I'll break these runes down according to the following roles. We'll have damage, both power and condition damage, boon support, and healers. We'll kick off by looking at the power damage runes. Typically, the best rune that you're going to be looking for is Rune of the Scholar. This is mainly because of the 5% increased outgoing damage when your health is above 90% on that 6 bonus, but this will generally place it above all the other power runes in the game. Plus you get the extra power and ferocity from all the other bonuses. An alternative to Scholar that's sometimes used is Rune of the Thief. The main thing about this is that it gives you a lot of extra precision, as well as giving you some increased strike damage when you're striking the foe from behind or from the flank. You'll notice you get a much bigger strike damage modifier at 10% rather than 5% compared to Scholar, at the cost of losing a lot of the good bonuses on your 1 through 5s. So instead of like power and ferocity, you get precision and condition damage. This is really only used on things like Warrior and Reaper, if I remember correctly, because they struggle to hit a 100% critical chance. And those are the two main runes that you have for power damage classes. There are a few extra runes that can be used as like good budget options, but we're not really going to touch on them in this video. That's for a future video. Now for condition damage classes, we have a lot more runes to choose from because there are different runes that will give you different bonuses specifically for different types of conditions depending on where your damage comes from. So compared to the two main ones that we had for power, there's going to be quite a few more for condition damage. There's not an insane amount though, so we should be able to easily work through them. So the main one we're going to be looking at first is Rune of the Nightmare. This is the go-to best in slot condition damage rune. The main thing we get is extra condition damage as well as 20% condition duration across all our different conditions. So this is a fantastic rune if your class puts out damage based on a variety of conditions. So if you do a good amount of bleeding, torment, poison, if you do a little bit of everything, Nightmare runes are probably going to be the best one that you can pick from. And then from here we start going into the runes that are specifically focused on a single condition. First one up is going to be Rune of Tormenting. This rune, as is the name, really focuses on upping that torment duration. So this is used on a few classes, I believe Harbinger, and I'm pretty sure Spectre as well, that rely heavily on torment duration. So these basically give you, what is that? That's 50% extra torment duration, and you also get regeneration whenever you inflict a foe with torment. This can be quite useful for a little bit of extra sustain, particularly if you're running Celestial gear. The downside of these runes is that they are fairly expensive. A full set of 6 of these is going to set you back over 30 gold if you buy them instantly. So that can be fairly prohibitive when you're just trying to gear out a new class. Rune of the Crate is mainly used on classes that rely very heavily on bleeding as their main source of damage. The main ones for this are Virtuoso and Condi Untamed. So similar to the Tormenting runes, we get, I believe it's 50% extra bleed duration. That's a huge amount of Condi duration that you'd otherwise need to invest in expertise for. Working our way down, we actually have a few different runes that are used for different thief builds. First up is Rune of the Thorns. This gives you access to 50% extra poison duration as well as a ton of extra condition damage. This one's used on a few different thief builds. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but I believe Condi Daredevil, may use this at the moment. Another rune that's commonly used by thief is Rune of the Afflicted. This is a bit of a mix between the Rune of the Thorns and Rune of the Crate. So you're getting some poison duration here, you've got some bleeding duration, as well as just some extra flat condition duration. If you do a good amount of bleeding and poison damage, this rune's a very good choice. It's also very cheap on the trading post as well, so this could potentially be a good budget pick for a few classes if you can't get a hold of Nightmare runes at this point. So Rune of Scavenging is a fairly interesting one. You get 20% extra poison duration on the 6 bonus, and you also convert 7% of your vitality into condition damage. It's a very interesting rune for builds that use Ritualist gear. So Ritualist gear will give you condition damage, concentration, expertise, as well as some vitality. So stacking this will give you a very high HP number that then transfers very well into the 6 bonus from Rune of Scavenging. Alacrity Spectre uses these runes because it basically has full Ritualist in every slot, so it has a lot of vitality, which then gets translated into a lot of condition damage. It also relies heavily on poison damage as well. The last rune for condition damage classes that we're going to talk about is Rune of Balthazar. So very similar to the other runes, we get 50% extra burning duration here. So this is a prime rune for Firebrand, Willbender, anything that relies heavily on burning damage. This is going to be the rune to go for. The 10% maximum health bonus on the 6 bonus here is very nice as well. Now moving on to the Boon Support classes, these will be anything that provides quickness and alacrity. The first one I'm going to talk about is Rune of the Firebrand. The main thing that this rune applies is a lot of extra boon duration as well as some direct quickness duration as well. So if we just take a look at this, we get 10% quickness duration, 10% boon duration, and 20% quickness duration. So this is very good for any class that uses condition damage as well as provides quickness. The main things that do this at the moment are Condi Quickness Firebrand as well as Condi Quickness Warrior as well. Rune of Leadership is the go-to rune for when you really want to provide a lot of boon duration to your class, because here we get 25% boon duration as well as some extra stat points allocated to all stats, which will then translate to a little bit of extra boon duration as well. The main thing this is used for is Condi Alak Renegade, because that class requires a lot of boon duration to function properly. Most classes don't tend to need as much boon duration as this, but this is really the go-to rune if you want to really pump that boon duration. Rune of the Traveller is basically a toned down version of Rune of Leadership. So instead of getting the 25% boon duration, we instead get 15% plus some extra condition duration as well. So this is very good for any class that needs a good amount of boon duration, relies on condition damage, and also to note this 25% movement speed bonus on the 6 bonus here is very handy to have. That can make moving around open world a lot easier. This is also a relatively cheap rune as well, so if you're just wanting to try out a condition boon support class, this is a very good one to go for. The Rune of Durability is basically the defensive version of Rune of the Traveller. So similarly, we get the 15% extra boon duration, but we also get some extra toughness thrown in, as well as 10% maximum health and some extra defensive boons when we're struck. So it's a very good boon for World versus World. This is used a lot on various different classes. Even some offensive classes will tend to run this for a bit of extra survivability. I also find this one to be a bit easier to get a hold of than Leadership runes, because this one uses Auric Basin currency from memory rather than the Dragon's Den currency for Leadership runes, so it's a bit easier to obtain as well. Nothing to note is that if these support classes don't need the extra boon duration, they quite commonly either run Nightmare rune or Scholar rune, basically just their standard DPS rune instead if they don't need that extra boon duration. Now moving on to healing classes, for most things, Rune of the Monk is going to be your go-to. This rune set is basically carried by a 6 bonus, so here we get 10% healing effectiveness to other allies, and we increase healing effectiveness to other allies by an additional 1% for 3 seconds after granting a boon to them. This basically ends up being an extra 20% healing effectiveness, which is giant. There's no other rune that compares to this. We also get the extra boon duration from our 2 and 4 bonuses, so we get an extra 15% boon duration here, as well as some extra healing power as well. So if you're looking to do a heal support build, more than likely you're going to be looking to get the Rune of the Monk. There are, however, a few alternatives that can be used. So Rune of the Water basically trades that extra healing effectiveness for some extra boon duration. So instead of that 10% healing modifier on the 6 bonus, we then instead get 10% boon duration. We also have some extra condition removal on allies as well. Rune of the Water can just be bought from the trading post as well, so you don't need to rely on dungeon currency to get it. So it may make it slightly easier for people to get a hold of if you don't do a lot of dungeons. Rune of Mercy is another rune that's primarily used by any class that really wants to revive allies effectively. The main thing that does this in PvE is Heal Scourge, because you get the damage reduction from when you're reviving an ally, and you also revive allies 20% faster and with 30% more health once they pop up. This is a giant bonus to reviving allies, and I believe Mesmer can also use it in World vs. World because they have a very good revival trait as well. They're really the only places you see this rune used. I really wouldn't recommend it outside of when you're really needing to revive people. But out of these, the vast majority of the time, the monk runes are what you're going to be looking for, and it's almost universally a good choice if you're running a healing build. This is like the best healing rune in the game. Now this list isn't necessarily exhaustive, but it should give you a decent idea of what runes you typically need to think about, depending on whichever role you're going for. Now some of these runes may be more expensive than others, looking at you, Runes of Tormenting, and others require specific currencies to obtain. Leadership runes are a particularly painful one. However, the runes mentioned here are typically best in slot and will be well worth the cost. A lot of the bonuses you get from having a good set of runes will be massive and will make your Guild Wars 2 exploits so much easier. Among the dozens of different runes, there are some budget choices which I'm quite fond of. These can be useful if you're strapped for cash or if you just want to try out a build without committing to the full best in slot price tag. That's for another video and another day, I think. However, with that, you no longer need to concern yourself with this monstrosity of a list and can take your build crafting to godhood with these massively overpowered runes.